Welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Chat with Lorin and Rob. Hey, Lorin, how's it going?
Good, Rob. How are you? Hi, everybody out there. Thanks for joining
Hey,
us.
yes, thank you to everybody. And I have a fun little discussion point for our chat today. I happen to be watching a movie with my daughter, and I won't say which daughter, but she can certainly zing one every once in a while. And she jokingly said to me, "Hey, Dad, do you yell out 'Pet Care Team Assemble'?" And I just laughed and went, I am going to have that discussion with Lauren. So I think that's like such a wonderful topic because there are different people who are involved throughout any pet's lifetime. And I just thought we'd start with who are some of the members of the pet care team that you think are important for us all to have. And then from there, I'm sure I'll build out with about 45 others.
Right. Um, Mine's actually pretty broad because having dealt with customers on this for a lot of years, everybody's got a vet, but you need a plan B vet for when
Yep.
your vet is gone. You need to have an emergency room that you like, that you feel good about taking your kid to. Um, You need to have, I mean, obviously, if you have a dog that needs grooming, you need a groomer, which we should get into the grooming at some point because that's a subject all in and of itself. The individuals that may be part of your pet care team and how you pick them. And you need, a lot of people will say, well, I take advice from my friends and my coworkers and things like that. There's nothing wrong with them being part of your information gathering team. I don't know that I'd make them part of your pet care team. You need to have either a good, reliable boarding facility that you've checked out in advance, or you need to have a already pre-screened pet sitter. And what I see is a lot of last minute stuff. People who go to groomers don't ask any questions. People who they decide to leave town and they call around and all they want to do is find a place that will take their
Right.
dog for the weekend. And I'm just like, oh my God, you don't know anything about it. You don't know where you're leaving your kid. You haven't gone and checked it out. You don't know anything. I mean, you're going to leave essentially your four-legged fur child with complete strangers, which, hopefully you wouldn't do if
Right.
it was a skin child. Um, so I think those are all important. The one that I've run into the most are the first ones that I said, not having a plan B vet or a second opinion vet,
Sure.
or not having a emergency room that you know of for weekends and after hours that you've already gone to and checked out. And that's the other thing. You just don't want to look things up on Google. My thing was always, I got to check you out. I mean, it's not just the reviews and who my neighbor recommends. It's I need to go see the facility. I need to talk to the, vets. I'll make an appointment and not take any of my animals, or I'll take one just to have an animal with me.
Sure.
But it's like, we're not doing anything. I'll pay the office visit, but I need to understand, who you are, what your requirements are, whether they align with me. I'm also using mostly holistic vets, but I'm looking for vets that are truly holistic, not who are using it as an adjective.
Right. So I love all those. I do. I want to have that conversation with you today. I want to talk about how we select each one of these. I do want to add a couple others though.
Okay.
All right. And this is from my experience, not only for my pets, but in traveling throughout the pet world and talking to different people. And I'll ask them, who's a part of your team. One that was interesting, um, and I've seen this trend happening more and more, and that is a pet nutritionist. someone that they go to because maybe they've had their confidence shook in the advice they were relying upon from their vet, and they now realize that, whoa, that may not be every vet's strong point. And then a couple others here. Um, Dog walkers. There are, we've got one in our neighborhood, and I swear we're all out there looking at a certain time because this person has the ability and the pack under complete control to walk 10 dogs at a time. And it is one of those where I always go, well, Belle, you will never be one of those 10, but God bless all of them. That is amazing. They're all having so much fun and they're so well behaved. So I think dog walker exercise, in the area I live, we've got those day camps where they'll come out and get the dogs and take them on an adventure, a hike, to the dog beach, etc. Um, we've got the trainers I want to talk about. And then it's just something I might know a little bit about your pet photographer. And I'll talk about why down the road there. But yeah, and there's so many others. But let's talk about, because I think you really started to open that conversation really well. And that is the process to pick your vet is really important and something that a lot of folks, I think, unfortunately, I think you kind of hit it. I have someone maybe I go get vaccinations from, or, whatever I'm required to by the local municipality that I live in. But other than that, I don't have a specific vet until something goes wrong. And that's the last time that you want to have to be figuring out who you're going to trust for medical care and advice and guidance. Kind of the same way, and I've done this in my business life for many years. You don't want to find your primary care doctor when you absolutely need them, and you've got to find somebody that morning, that afternoon, that evening. Spend some time, do the research ahead of time. And I love what you talked about, because that's always my thing. At a minimum, go by that office and just walk through it. If you can't be there when you're healthy, or you don't think that your pets can be in that environment, that should immediately be the flag. It's off my list, because they're coming in stressed, you're coming in stressed. If that environment is already chaotic and you've got nothing but yourself walking through, forget it. That's just the easiest first way, for me. But I think your process is a process I probably am closer aligned to. But share that, because I think it's not just you going there. You go there with questions. You go there with, I'm specifically almost interviewing that.
Oh, I'm interviewing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm interviewing because what I see a lot, and this topic has come up, oh my gosh, dozens of times in my group. And what I see is just, it's frustrating for me, because people look at doctors, medical doctors, and veterinarians with a lens that is one of easily intimidated. A lot of times they assign a deference, and and it's because of the schooling and those kinds of things.
Sure.
I used to do this thing when I had seminars where I would be talking to people and I'd say, here's what we're going to talk about today, and it was probably nutrition centric, and then I'd say, I'd preface it with, those of you who know me, it's because you come to my store, blah, 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 blah. And those of you who don't, who've come along, give me 1 second. And I'd walk away and come back and I'd have a white coat on. And I'd say, does this make a difference for you? And the people who knew me would laugh. And the other people would be like, I'd be like, and therein lies the problem.
Right.
Because they're all, everyone is a human being, you know what I mean? And we learn differently. We whether we excel or not is individualistic. You don't know anything about what this person's time was. Did they barely skate by in school and manage to get their degree or their license? But oof, it was touch and go there. Those kinds of situations. We don't know that. There's a diploma hanging on the wall. It shows you the year in the school that they came from, but you don't know anything else. So I generally make no bones about it. I have to feel it out sometimes when I call. When I moved to Texas, for example, I had all my California vets dialed in. I worked with a lot of them, with a lot of different clients. I had my favorites, and I worked with conventional, integrative, and holistic because different situations called for different things.
Yeah,
And so when I would go, it was a lot of listen, here's where my mindset is at. If that's not a good fit for you, I understand. But it generally starts with a phone call. So when I moved here, I did all the research online. I looked at the reviews, those sorts of things, and then I called. And I said, let me be perfectly frank with you. My animals are raised holistically. They eat this particular type of diet. Vaccines are an issue for me because where I came from, there are some vets who do them as frequently as every 6 months, the revolving door thing. And I said, so I kind of want to get a feel for are you truly holistic? Or do you just have some holistic modalities, that kind of thing? And you always get the front staff's always a little bit guarded, right? Because they're never asked these kinds of things. And no matter what, unless I can tell that we clearly don't align, I make an appointment. And they'll say, "What's it for?" And I go, "You can't say interview." So I
right.
go, "Wellness check."
Nice.
And I give them a kid's name, and my husband and I go in. And this has happened in cases of having to talk to an emergency vet that I may not know, having to talk to new vets, where somewhere along the line, the vet will look at my husband or I and say, "Is one of you a vet?" And we're like,
Right.
"Nope." We just, and now ever since the term came out, I'll deliberately use this term because I know the perception that it creates for the veterinarian, and I'm good with it. And it's a derogatory term, but we call ourselves helicopter parents.
Mm.
Because yeah, we're going to be those people. We're going to ask you a million questions. We're going to oversee everything. No, you can't take my kid out of the room. Everything you do, whether it's drawing blood or anything else, has to be in front of me. The exception to that, of course, would be x-rays. Now, the vets that I worked with, that I was friends with, I was everywhere. I was, around when there was surgery. I was where the x-ray rooms were, those kinds of things. But I was very close with them and I understood what the rules were. Um, but you can't expect that
Right.
in, regular places. So if you're going to do an x-ray, before an x-ray is needed, I've laid so much groundwork and established such a relationship with the vet that they understand you need to take my kid to the back and do the x-ray and bring my kid straight back. We're not going to do we're not going to do a catheter in the back. Not every vet's going to be good with that. And I do realize that for some people, they're very limited in what their options are in their area. I see that in my group a lot. But for me, I'm usually living in cities, I'll drive an hour or more, for to see a vet that I like. And I do. I actually I do for the vet that I like. But I have a plan B now. It took a while for me to find that plan B holistic vet. And I have an appointment set with her. She doesn't know it's an interview, but I'm going to go and check things out and, see where her head is at, and make sure she's truly holistic. And I'll ask things on the phone like, what holistic modalities does the vet ascribe to? Oh, we do Chinese herbal medicine, we do, and the list of, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. So at some point, it becomes obvious really early on if they're truly holistic versus integrative. Frankly, the vast majority of people using the word holistic are integrative, or the facility they're working in is integrative.
Sure.
And I'm okay with that as long as we're on the same, they understand where we're at. The interesting part for the vet here in Texas was I got a 15-page questionnaire they wanted me to fill out that asked such in-depth questions about what do you feed? How many proteins do you feed? And I was like, that's interesting. Not answering any of that, but interesting that they asked all that. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm not going through all this. I'm not answering any of that. I answered the basic stuff that you needed to know, and we'll talk about the rest because I knew that with it, I'm not sure I'm going to be an established client of yours. So,
Yeah.
I got a little pushback when I sent it back. The other thing too is when you need a vet under duress, an ER, your vet's not available. Like my holistic vet's not available right now. She broke her ankle and she's out. And it's like, okay, that reminds me, I need a plan B. So I don't need her right now, but I better get that in line. But if I need an emergency room, do I want to wait until under duress where I'm just going to go, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, which most people do. And we don't do that, but I understand what that's like. I mean, I had a dog that was in congenital, she had a congenital heart defect. I can't talk today. And she went into, she ended up passing at the emergency room, or actually, I agreed to put her under because she was failing and she was acutely failing. And the situation at the vet was that it was an emergency room and they just wanted to take her in the back. And I was like, no, I need to hold her. And my vet, who was tied up, who I knew at the emergency room, she knew I was out there. And she came out and she saw her and she goes, oh, yeah. And she went to in the back to get everything ready. And I could hear her start to get even worse. And I was yelling for the vet. And I was like, we need to do it right now, right now. Can't do this anymore.
Mm.
But you have to go and establish that relationship because otherwise people think this person's dangerous. They're
Right.
losing their mind and they're too emotional, puts people on edge, it makes people guard themselves and want to keep you at arm's length. And she knew me for years, so she immediately took me to the back. And it wasn't in the usual area that she would take a client, but she knew me. And
Right.
for me, it was like, stop the suffering, stop the suffering. She's failing.
Yeah.
And, I was crying. She was crying. The vet was crying. But I was able to keep it together for the most part because I understood it. So if you don't take the time when it's not necessary to have those relationships, at the 11th hour and you're under duress is the wrong time. When you go to the vet because your kid's broken their leg, you're going to sign up for whatever. Whereas, if I've got the kind of breed that is prone to ACL issues or prone to hip issues or any of those kinds of things, I might want to do the research ahead of time to
Right.
find those people who are experts in that.
Yeah.
Where are those facilities? Who are those vets? And maybe, at some point, go see them. So, again, helicopter parent, I know that that's not practical for most people, but I've dealt with so many clients in that situation that it sort of red flagged it for me that I can avoid this if I do these things ahead of time.
Right. Well, and it brings up a couple things for me. One, I was in that situation when Sugar, my soul dog, she had the microfractures from being thrown out of a car before we adopted her. And when that leg gave way, exactly what you're talking about. We had to kick into gear immediately. There was no time for anything other than scoop up dog, get dog to the emergency center. And sadly, the only one that was open was a drive because we lived out in a I won't say a remote area because folks look it up today and be like, that's not remote. Back then, it was much more remote. So we had a long drive, and what that showed me too was if I just wasn't aware, and to your point, awareness, right? I knew that was a possibility. So I knew which animal hospitals were open 24/7 around us. And this was not one city over, this was two cities over because it happened at night, after hours, of course. And so you gotta know all those things. And what it really implanted in me for good was much like I change my air filters in my home once, a quarter, once ever. I'm doing the same thing. Check the batteries, whatever your routine is. Do a quick update of all of your list of, caregivers for your pets because things change.
Mm-hmm.
Offices move, vets move offices.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, I've also had vets retire and stop practicing full time after
Yes.
practice, right? They bring in new people. So you want to know all those things ahead of time, like you said. And Bella's here for that specific reason because I was able, even in an emergency situation, I thankfully had the knowledge of what I thought might be going on. And so when they gave me their diagnosis, I did not agree with what action they thought they should take, which, again, medicine is a practice. It's not a absolute. And Belle's still here and she's awesome. But I'm aware of those things. And to your point, I've also looked, and when I have my conversations with the different vet that we may be going to, I'll ask him, what's your background with vestibular issues and this and that? And because I know that can come up at any point with
Sure.
so I love that you call that out. I
So
think
one of the things I wanted to mention on that too, for people to get in the mindset of, is a doctor, a vet, any of those people, they're independent contractors.
right,
And that's how you need to view them. You shouldn't go in there in such awe that you feel like you can't question anything. You can do your research and you don't have to be antagonistic or anything, but you can ask questions. And if a vet or a doctor doesn't respond to you because they don't like being questioned or they feel challenged or anything, that might be a big red flag,
right,
because I need to know what you know. And, a good example is at one time I was told that one of my small breed dogs had luxating patellas that were so bad that she needed surgery. And it turned out that wasn't the case. She had genetic deformities that couldn't be corrected anyway. So I went to one of my best friends, who's also a vet that I trust implicitly, and said, so if I decide to do this, you can do this, right? The luxating patella surgery. And he went, no. I'm like, what do you mean, no? And he goes, no, I don't do them. And I was, wait, but you'll do it for me, right? Because we're friends. He said, nope. I go, how can you tell me no? I mean, no is not an option. And he said, I'm telling you no because you're my friend, because I
right,
don't do these. I'm not good at them. I don't have enough practice in them. I'm not as well versed. There are better people to do it than me. That made such an impression on me that I mean, he's a phenomenal vet. And I thought, this is what separates you. The acknowledgement that no one can be an expert in everything. And, he did the same thing when it came to nutrition. He used to send people to my store because he said, honestly, we don't learn anything about nutrition in vet school. He goes, I don't know anything other than what they tell us to recommend.
right.
And he said, so I'm not the person, but I can tell you who is. And he would send people to me and I'd be like, yeah, no sweat. Wait, let's talk about it. What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah,
I so value people who are professionals that are willing to say, it's not my bailiwick. Let me recommend somebody, because otherwise they could just take your money. And so much of things nowadays, not just veterinarians, but everything is about money, 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 money. And I don't want my kid to be the cash cow.
right.
And people will tell me all the time, it doesn't matter how much it costs. And I'm like, okay, time out. Don't go in someplace saying that. I understand that's your mindset. You'll pay whatever it costs. The money isn't the issue. And they say that out loud. Unless you know the person that you're saying it to and their ethics and integrity, that's probably not a good statement to make because you don't want to pay for unnecessary tests and unnecessary procedures. You'll pay whatever you need to that's required,
Right.
but you don't want to have your bill padded. And so it's again that duress thing of go in prepared, that you already know this person, you already know where their head is at. And it turns out I was really happy that he said that because it took me longer to try to consider who I might have to do that surgery, which made me investigate further and found out
Yeah.
surgery wouldn't have helped her anyway.
Right. Well, and I wanted to bring up something that you just touched on as well, and a couple things actually. But the I've been fortunate. I have not met a vet who is not well intentioned, overworked, you know, feels the depth of what they're doing and how it impacts not just that particular animal, but the family that loves that animal. So I've been very fortunate, maybe, but um, I meet a lot of wonderful people. What I think is the difference, and you just pointed it out, is that intention and action. Well intended does not mean great outcomes. And to your point, and that was the whole thing. One of the things I work into my talk track is if this isn't something you encounter a lot, I'm okay with that. If you've got a recommendation, like let them know you're not judging them.
Right.
Uh, you're not trying to catch them in the gotchas. There are too many people out there who go to Dr. Google or Dr. AI or wherever else, and I know everything walking into the appointment. I'll hear that a lot from my veterinarian friends of it was already difficult with Google. And now you throw in AI and everybody walks in with their own diagnosis. And when I try and have that friendly conversation of, yeah, I know that's what you read. I know that's what your AI, is telling you. I'm looking at your animal and I am telling you, your kid has this going on, no matter what your, internet or phone solution is telling you. So, I just throw that caution out there is we do get into that heightened state. And that's where, what you're talking resonates with me. The other thing too that I, will often ask, how'd you find your vet? Oh, my friends, you know, and nothing wrong with getting recommendations, but I just not to be the jerk friend, but I often chuckle because I'm like, who says that their vet or their doctor is an awful doctor? Because why would you stay with that person if that's how you really felt, right? So if I'm asking, it's kind of like when a job interview goes, can you give us references? And like, I just think it's the most archaic way to do things because
Right.
it's going to give you references that aren't going to be glowing.
Right.
So, just because you get the right, well, follow up. It's like we've talked about it. And Lauren, I think that's one of the big things why we decided to do the show is like a lot of people ask the first question, but the first question is really the knocking on the door. And once the door opens, there are many other questions that you've got to ask. So it's who's your vet? Why are they your vet? What's been your experience? What's the office like? What kind of, things have you experienced there in the treatment and care? Those things don't happen. It often stops with the just like,
Oh, I
oh,
love
hey,
them. Yeah.
yeah, oh, I love it. She's great. He's great. And so I think that's important. And then there's one that I didn't hit on, but is really, important and dear to me, and that is um, the pet insurance side of things, right? Do they take insurance? Are they part of one of the discount programs? Or are they none of that? Here's what the pricing is. And what's interesting is I can argue the positive and negative on all of those, right? So I'm not for, against, etc. But as you're looking at how are you doing those things, because I do see a lot of decisions made in that moment, like you said. There are a lot of folks who will say, I will spend anything and everything, and only to find out that, well, your everything still may not get that care that you
Right.
need. And now all of a sudden, I'm in a different situation and conversation at the office while my pet is suffering,
Hmm.
trying to, get, financing and things like that. So all of this is an important part of that discussion as you're going through. So yeah, no, I love that you share that. And I think
Well,
the other thing, go ahead.
I used to tell people who would tell me how much they love their vet. There was a vet in my area that threw antibiotics at every animal, regardless of what was going on. Come in for a wellness check. Here's a prescription for antibiotics. I'm like, why? What was wrong with your kid? Did your kid have anything going on? Any type of infection or anything? No. Well, why are you giving antibiotics? Don't give those. And the argument I got back so many times because I would say, I have a problem with this type of administration, service administration. And and they go, but I love him. He's so great. And I started telling people, I said, take him to lunch, hang out with him, whatever, play around and golf with him. You invite him to your Christmas party, whatever it is, but don't take your animal there or don't take the antibiotics. I mean, it's like you have to think beyond a great guy, oh, she's fabulous. I mean, they're people and a lot of them are really good at, they're dealing with animals and animals bring out hopefully the best in human beings. I mean, how many of us have vets that get down on the floor,
Oh,
because they love their animals? Well, that's very endearing, right?
right,
And so all of these things that even though we're not judging in our heads, we're ticking off all these positives. Oh, I love that, love that, love that. And then it becomes a weighing out of, I loved these 15 things. These six weren't great, but it outweighs this. Okay, my next question is, do you have any other options? Can you go and see what, maybe you can see if there's anything out there or have a plan B. But I would get, and again, not to be that jerk person, but to say, oh my God, then take them to lunch. I'm not
right,
telling you that they're not a great person. I'm just telling you that throwing antibiotics at everything is 100% improper. And then I got to help you fix the microbiome.
right. Well, and I think that you just said, like, know their limitations, you know, and that doesn't mean you don't go to them. Doesn't mean you don't trust them on the things that they are going
But
to
speak
serve.
up.
Yeah, exactly. Because listen, I use a lot of herbs that I don't think most doctors and vets beyond are gonna know. And so I always have to kind of also caution them of, yeah, I'm not going that path, but thanks. I've got an herb that does that. That's more natural. So I'm good. Well, which one and what? And then I find myself educating that person, and
Right.
and that's fine. I'm happy to do that, right? I'm not going to bill them like they're billing me, and so they better not bill me for that talk track time. But I will say, it is there. There have been a number of times where I have a follow up, and they'll be like, "Wow, things look great. Would you do?" And I'll be like, "Here was the regimen." Probably not, something that can be duplicated by a lot of your folks, though, because they may not know where to get these herbs or this or that. And from that standpoint, it goes back to just, I think what you and I are really saying is communicate. And if you're not liking everything you're hearing, understand that's where that communication has to shift to somebody else, that you can find the pathway to get to where you want to get. Because my whole philosophy is there are many pathways to the end goal. Which one am I going to take at this moment in time? And that's really where I come back down to on the vets. I have You and I both have access to a lot of different vets, a lot of wonderful, amazing people. There is not any one of them who I don't think are amazing. But that doesn't mean in every situation I'm
that
going
they're
to
a
run
fit.
to, yeah, any one of them. There are specifics for each one of those people. We have disagreements. I've been thrown out of offices before.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
in those disagreements, always respectfully. Hey, Rob, you do know where the front door is, right? Yes, I do. Oh, use it is what you were saying. Gotcha. Yeah, we'll end this conversation here. But I know that you and I and many of the folks listening, and again, share that feedback with us. What have you experienced and all that? Send us the emails, share it with us on our social medias, because this is how we also learn, right? This is how
Right.
we get that ability to round out. We're not going to experience everything, just like you can't be an expert in everything. You can't experience everything as well. If you saw Lauren cringe, that's because I use that the word we're not supposed to. It's not Voldemort, it's expert, right?
Uh,
But
but to that point too, I also want to point out because in my group, which my group is primarily a natural, go the way of natural first,
right,
nothing should be exclusive, meaning that there are if something doesn't work, I've had conversations in the group where I go, this is not the time for a natural remedy. With what you're showing me, with what you're telling me, with the x-rays that I'm looking at, get thee to a vet, and follow the protocol that they're recommending. We can, after that, we can look at, maybe the course we take after that. It just sort of depends. There shouldn't be this is the only way I'm going to do it, which is what we run into, right, with food too.
right,
It's this way or the highway. There's, if every being was the exact same, then maybe that would work. But that's not how it is, and it's never going to be how it is. And it's the beauty of that not being that way. So why don't we look at them as individuals and go, okay, what's fitting at this particular moment in time? Recently somebody had posted in the group, and I said, "Hmm, at this point in time," and it was a crystals situation. I said, at this point in time, the length of time that a natural product is needed is concerning for what I'm looking at on your x-rays that you've posted. So I'm going to tell you that you should do XYZ, and in the meantime, be collecting the funds that you need to look at removal of this quantity of crystals that this kid is
yeah,
suffering through. And then after that, we can talk about moving on with something natural that will keep, either reduce that, mitigate that from being a problem in the future. And I think too many people get stuck in it. It's the same thing with convention. The doctors that medical doctors that I most relate to. I had a particular doctor one time that I'm allergic to everything. So it's like, I can't take this, I can't take that, I can't take any good drugs, no pain pills, nothing, right? So he's like, oh, so what do you take? And I said, white willow. And he goes, oh, derivative of aspirin. Hang on a minute. Actually, it's the other way around. Aspirin's a derivative of white willow. But you knew that? We got into this. I'm not kidding you. I felt bad because his next patient had to wait so long. We got on this whole thing, and he's like, yeah, yeah, I'm good with that. And he said, tell me what you think about. And we got on this whole thing about natural things,
right.
and I'm like, I literally had a doctor drop me because I said, I don't want to take aspirin, I'll take white willow, it's easier on my stomach. And he's like, I don't support herbs.
Oh
Okay,
wow.
if you do a little bit of research, you'll see that aspirin was actually derived from white willow to begin with. And he goes, you don't know what you're talking about. I was like, oh, this is not going well. And just basically refused to take me as a patient. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for that. Because if I can't talk to you about it, you don't have to agree with me. But, if I can have other options because your pain pills aren't going to be an option for me,
Yeah.
so I'm
Well,
forced into that situation.
yeah, and I want to hit two things on that. Number one, thank you for putting that out there because, folks, this is one of the big things that is it gets me is I've said that to people as well. Hey, this is not the time for the natural remedy because your pet is at such an extreme level and suffering because of that. We need a combined approach. We need a, targeted. And to your point, then we can work back.
Aren't they shocked though when they hear you
Yeah,
say that? Because you're the
exactly.
natural guy.
Yeah, like, wait, what? I thought you were, and I'm like, no,
Right,
listen, I have had my own situations where I have had to say, you throw everything pharma at that, and I'll get myself back on the natural in combination with that, and, shocked the doctors in
right.
how well I've done with that. That being said, I also think that that give and take and that the conversations. One thing I just made a note for myself here because it's one of the problems that I think doctors have, I think veterinarians have, um, really a lot of the scientific world has, and that is their communication skills are not often the best. I love you all out there, okay, but you almost have to have that filter where you cut off some of the empathy, some of the ability to communicate in a way that resonates with a majority of the folks, I'll just say. And it's one of the things I see a lot in the pet world. I talk about the passion of the pet world is often the doom of the business side of the pet world. Same thing with when you're talking to the vets and the people who are deeply, deeply knowledgeable about stuff, but don't have the ability to convey it in a way that is digestible, understandable, relatable. And so, that's where we as a pet parent have to also look and go, I'm not getting this, Doc. Can you, bring it down? I get it. There's something big here, but you're overshooting, you know, I didn't go to vet school. So can we bring it down a level to something that I understand? And here's my philosophy, which may not be at the level, but there's, to your point, a lot of reason for it. And it is interesting because I've had that experience as well, where they'll say, "Oh, we want you to take." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to take this, which actually has not just the efficacy of that, but three other things that my body system needs." So thanks. And I've had also that experience of like, well, if you're going to do that, you shouldn't be coming to me. You're right, I shouldn't, and I won't be on the follow
Right.
up. Find somebody else. But communication is tough for a lot of these folks, and so it's really incumbent upon you as an advocate for yourself, but as an advocate for your pet to really drive the communications. That doesn't mean be rude or everything and blah, 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 I read this or but you still have to advocate. You still have to communicate because at the end of the day, you're in there for a short period of time, and when you go home, if you didn't understand what they said, that can be dangerous. You know.
Yeah, the flip side of that, though, because I've talked to some vet friends about this years ago, because, for me, everything is a Rubik's Cube. So I want everything to line up. I want to understand all parts of it. And and I said, what is the problem? I don't understand why so many people come away without having any idea what just happened in the office, what the vet said, what went on. Is it their lack of questions? Is it their lack of understanding? Is it the fact that there's a roaring in their ears because it's their baby and they're worried? Um, is it the fact that you talked over them, didn't tell them enough? What is it? There's an interesting aspect that a few of them said, some of it is we don't want our words used against us. And I said, what does that mean exactly to you? And there have been things that, I mean, it's a proven fact people don't hear everything that anybody says, and they extrapolate or they take out of context or, how it processed from that person's mouth into their head and then they thought about it afterwards somehow gets twisted around. And and I said, so you don't do it at all? And they're like, you're just careful. in what you say. And that comes back to the client has to build a certain level of trust too. The vet needs to be able to trust the client as much as the other way around. You should be partners in your animal's care, right? You should be, I mean, that's how I viewed us as a holistic pet supply store was we were partners in caring for your animals, whether your kid was in grooming or you were coming in for, getting a product or something. We needed to consider that as we're a partner with you in taking care of your kid. So we're right with you every step of the way. And I hear and see and read in my group sometimes the interactions that some people have with their vets and how confronting they are, and how they go in, with an attitude or whatever. It's like, oh my gosh, this person just wants to help you. If you don't agree, it's okay that you don't agree. It doesn't
Right.
have to be a fight. If this isn't the fit, if you don't agree with it, ask more questions. If the answers to the questions come and you don't like them, you don't have an understanding, and you've exhausted your ability to, get your questions answered, it's time to move on to somebody else to get a second opinion, and,
Yes.
and find out more. But you can't beat someone up because you're not being a good partner in that relationship. You need to, okay, I get that. This part over here that you were trying, I don't really understand that part. Can you go over that with me again? What are the side effects? To what end? That was a big thing when I always tell my group. When you get all this information of what you need to do from a vet, well, we need to do this, and we need to do that, we need to do this, and we need to do that. And all of that comes together when you're at the point where the vet's now waiting for you to say something back like, yeah, I'm going to do that, or yeah, or how much is that, or to what end? What is the expectation if we do all that?
Right.
If we're going to do those things, then what? If you're doing something, a lot of times there are people in my group that the vet there's an expectation of cancer and they go to the vet and the vet wants to do this myriad of things and it's going to be 15 grand and it has a whole plan laid out for them and they make it very plain that they're never going to put their kid through chemo, or they're never going to do XYZ. And it's like, did you convey that? Well, no. Well, then the vet's not aligned with where your head is at. So he's not even offering another alternative.
Well, I'm so happy you said that because you're correct. That is something too that I see a lot from folks. I just, shut down, let them say what they have to say, and then we left. Well, who did that serve? It didn't serve anybody.
Right.
You went there for help. What help did you get by just shutting down? Nothing. So, at a minimum, if you say, hey, that's not the pathway I'm willing to go, it at least gives you and them the alternative to say, okay, if that's not the pathway, here's the other options. They may not be as good or effective, but here's the other options. And that happens a lot.
A
That happens
lot.
a lot, so I agree with you. You just can't shut down. And I'm someone who has said that's not a pathway we're going. I am going to take a different pathway. Um, and in my situation, it was when I explained the pathway I was thinking, the vet was like, "Wow, I don't have experience in that. Please let me know how that works."
Right.
You know, because I'm really interested. And by the way, a good vet checks back in with you because
Yes.
I got a call back from them, not immediately, but a few weeks later, and it was just hey, just curious how did it all work out, you know,
I don't want to
and
make that the caveat to being a good vet though, because
oh yeah,
I've
no, no, I no good communicator. You're right.
a
Let's
good
yeah,
communicator. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Because I've
yeah.
also I've done that with it's so great to have friends that are actually veterinarians because they get to ask them things, that you couldn't just come out and ask a stranger vet, right? So, do you follow up? Do you ask? I mean, for me, even in my group, I'll be like, I'll go through something with somebody and I go, please follow up because I want to
Right.
know what the outcome is. They're going to the vet, blah, blah, blah. I have to be the one to go back in and go, what
Yeah.
happened? I'm
Yeah.
vested. I want to know. And
Right.
I have a client, she's a medical doctor, and she says, nobody ever checks. Nobody ever asks. She goes, I don't understand. She goes, you call and ask more than anybody else asks. And I said, well, I got to have resolution. I need closure. I need to know where we're at. I need to know if the kid's better. The situation got resolved, or is there something else we need to look at another direction? I'm invested with
Right.
this situation because I've already spent time on it now and I care. And this is a dog or a cat or whatever it is, it's an animal, and I need to know the outcome. I can't just shine it on because I find myself waiting for the update and waiting for the update until I finally go, what happened? Oh, everything's fine. Okay, we could have just posted that because I'm sort of, it's running through my head like, I hope
Right.
Sophie's doing okay. I hope Snickers is doing good. Um, so I want to know, but a lot of vets, they just don't have the time. I mean, they're
Yeah.
buried.
No, they are. They are. And it's tough. The emotional toll
Oh,
that the vets go through is very, very tough. And my hat's off to all of them on that aspect alone. That's not something I personally think I would want to have to deal with on a daily basis. It's not for me. But there are so many more. We didn't even get into the rest of the care team.
we're gonna have to do a
Um,
series of
so
these for
yeah,
each
we'll
one
do a
of these.
series. But I love that. And thank you, all you out there listening, watching. We could not and would not do this without all of you being a part of it. So really appreciate you being here. Um, I know that we've got so much more to share, but I think maybe this is that point that I'll just say. Again, thank you, everybody. There's a lot, as you can see, that you need to be thinking about considering just when you're talking about that immediate care of veterinarian, hospital, if you had to go there, what the hours are, what do they accept, what's their philosophy and their modalities, and all of these different things. So we may not have hit on something. Share it with us, share it with the group. We would love to, have those additional things out there for everybody. We don't know until we know, right? So
Right. So
share it out.
to that point, we do have an email. If you guys want to ask us any questions, again, keep in mind we're not going to answer you directly, but we may use some of it on future podcasts. The email is practicalpetchat, singular chat at gmail.com. And then, at some point, we can also talk about um, the group and those kinds of things. But
Yeah.
for now, please send everything via email, and we want to hear from you. And we so appreciate that you guys spend your time with us. We know that everybody's super busy, and if you're doing things where you have us in the background, we appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right, Rob, talk to you soon.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.